Welcome back, students. We'll be looking at section 2.7, practice problems for solving linear inequalities. The first group of practice problems says write an inequality and interval notation for each of the following. Where we get our information for that is the actual graphed number line. So the first thing I notice is I have the line starting at this 4 here. I also noticed that there's a bracket right above the 4. That bracket tells me that that 4 is going to be included. So I'm going to put the 4 here. The other thing I need to look at is the direction of the line. The line is going towards the left. It's going towards the negative numbers, which means it's going towards negative infinity. So that tells me the value of x is going to be less than 4. But remember, we already noticed the bracket. The brackets tell us that the 4 is also included. So our inequality symbol is actually going to be less than or equal to. So the value of our x is less than or equal to 4. Now let's write our interval notation. I already mentioned that we know the line is going towards negative infinity. So remember, we always put our negative infinity on the left, and it always has the parentheses with it. Our 4 is going to have a bracket because it's included in our solutions. Number 2, our line is now being graphed towards positive infinity. It's going to the right. So I know that our symbol is going to say, our inequality symbol is going to be greater than. But I need to look at what it says about the number that it starts at. It starts at -2. And we have a parentheses. So that means -2 is not included in that solution. So I'm going to have a -2 here, but we're going to keep our inequality symbol as just greater, not greater than or equal to. And then I'm going to have the x in front. So the way we read it is x is greater than -2, which is exactly what our line tells us, that the value of x is greater than -2. It's not equal to it, it's just greater than it. The interval notation. Since -2 is not included, I have a parentheses. And then we're going towards positive infinity. We're going towards the right. So that means our positive infinity is on the right when we write our interval notation. Number 3. This graphing is a little bit different. The first thing I notice is it doesn't go on infinitely in one direction or another. It has two endpoints. One of them is at -3, and one of them is at 4. I also noticed that we have parentheses. We don't have brackets. So I noticed that -3 and 4 are not included in our solutions. The first thing I'm going to do is write -3 here, and I'm going to write 4 here. And I know x is in between. The value of x is in between those numbers because the line indicating that is in between those numbers. -3 is less than that line, the values of x. But that line is less than 4. It's on the left side of the 4, so it's less than 4. So the way we would read this is -3 is less than x, whatever that value of x is, which is less than 4. Now let's look at the interval notation. We have parentheses, -3, comma, 4, parentheses. And the way someone would read that is the value of x is between -3 and 4, from -3 to 4, but not including those numbers. Number 4. We have a similar situation where we're going to have two framing points. We have -1 and we have 4. So I'm going to start with the -1 here and the 4 here, and I know that my x is somewhere in the middle. I notice that they both have brackets. They don't have parentheses. So that means those numbers are included in the solutions. So -1 is less than or equal to, since it has a bracket, and x is less than or equal to 4. Because this middle line, part of the graph, that is that is demonstrating the values of x. Any of those numbers on that line are the values of x. Now the interval notation. Since they both have brackets, I'm going to have a bracket, -1, comma, 4, bracket. Now let's look at 5 through 8. Write an interval notation and graph a number line for each of the following. This time we're getting the inequality. We need to do the graphing, and we still need to come up with the interval notation. I find that it's easier to figure out my interval notation once I've graphed it. I have a visual there to look at, and it just helps me to lay out the exact way to write the interval notation based on the picture. So let's do that first. Let's graph it. The inequality is x is less than 5. So I know my frame of reference is 5. And it tells me that x is less than that. It's not including it, it's just less than that. So I'm going to have the parentheses here. And since x is less than that, I'm going to go to the left. Now looking at my image, I notice that it's going left towards -infinity. So I have -infinity. And then my 5 has a parentheses because there's no or equal to. It's just less than. Number 6, x is greater than or equal to 1. So my frame of reference is a 1. And it tells me the value of x is greater than or equal to. So it's included, so I have a bracket, and since x is greater than, I'm going to go to the right. So I'm going to have a bracket 1, comma, positive infinity. Number 7. This is like the ones we did earlier where we have 2 endpoints. We're not going to have an infinity. So I have one endpoint of -5 and one endpoint of 2. The -5 is less than or equal to x. So I'm going to have a bracket. And then 3, or not 3, let me erase that. It should be 2. 2, with our other endpoint, x is less than 2. It's not included, it's just less than. So I'm going to have a parentheses. And then I'm going to connect my 2 symbols. The interval notation will be read as bracket -5, comma, 2, parentheses. The -5 is included, so it has a bracket. The 2 is not included, so it has a parentheses. Number 8. We have -2 is less than x, which is less than or equal to 3. So my 2 reference points are -2 and 3. -2 is not included because it's just less than, so I have a parentheses. But 3 is included because it's less than or equal to, so it's going to have a bracket. And then I'm going to connect the 2. So the interval notation would be parentheses -2, comma, 3, bracket. Now we're going to solve some inequalities, write an interval notation, and graph a number line for each of the following. So we're going to do all 3. The first thing we need to do, looking at number 9, is subtract 7 from both sides. So I'm going to do that. I'm going to subtract 7. I get 3x plus 0 is greater than or equal to 2x plus 4. Rewrite that. Now I need to subtract 2x from both sides. And I get 1x is greater than or equal to 0 plus 4, which is just x is greater than or equal to 4. That is our inequality. So I'm going to write that over here. Now we need to graph the line. So our frame of reference is 4. The value of x is greater than or equal to that. So I have a bracket, and it's going to go towards positive infinity. So the way I would write my interval notation is parentheses 4, comma, positive infinity, parentheses. Actually, my 4 should be a bracket, so let me fix that. because it said it was included. Hopefully you caught that. All right, so now it's correct. Number 10, 5x minus 2 is less than 4x minus 5. I'm going to add 2 to both sides. I get 5x plus 0 is less than 4x minus 3. Now I'm going to subtract 4x from both sides. I get 1x is less than 0 minus 3. So my inequality is x is less than negative 3. So I'm going to write that here. My frame of reference is the negative 3. X is less than it, doesn't include it, but it's less than that. So I'm going to have a parentheses here. And since it's less than, we're going to go towards the left, towards negative infinity. Our interval notation will be parentheses, negative infinity, comma, negative 3, parentheses. Number 11. We have 2x is greater than or equal to negative 10. I need to divide both sides by 2 to get that x by itself. I'm dividing by a positive number, so my inequality symbol stays the same. It's going to be x is greater than or equal to negative 5. So I'm going to write that here. And now we're going to graph it on the number line. Our frame of reference is the negative 5. All right, so x is greater than or equal to. So negative 5 is included in the solution, so I'm going to have a bracket. And then x is greater than or equal to that, so I'm going to go to the right. Our interval notation is bracket, negative 5, comma, positive infinity, parentheses. Number 12. This one is a negative k is less than 0. Remember that there's an invisible 1 here. Okay, so we have a negative 1k is less than 0. I need to divide both sides by that negative 1. I end up with a positive k. Because I divided by a negative 1, my inequality needs to flip, and it becomes greater than. 0 divided by a negative 1 is just 0. So my inequality is k is greater than 0. So our frame of reference is 0. K is greater than that. Doesn't equal it, it's just greater than that. So we're going to have a parentheses here, and we're going to go towards the right. Our interval notation is going to be parentheses 0, comma, positive infinity, parentheses. Number 13. We have a fraction. And remember, the way that we cancel fractions when we're trying to get a variable by itself is to multiply both sides by the reciprocal, the flipped version of that fraction. So that's what we're going to do here. I'm going to write out negative 2/5 times negative 5/2 p is less than negative 15 times negative 2/5. The negative 2 times the negative 5 gives us a positive 10. 5 times 2 is a positive 10. P. Our inequality is going to flip because we multiply by a negative number. Remember, the rule is if you multiply or divide by a negative number. So it's now greater than. Negative 15 times negative 2 is a positive 30, and then it's over 5. That is going to simplify into P is greater than 30 divided by 5 is 6. So our inequality is P is greater than 6. This is our frame of reference. And it said P is greater than that, not equal to, but greater. So we're going to have a parentheses and then the arrow going towards the right. Our interval notation is going to be parentheses 6, comma, positive infinity, parentheses. Number 14. We have a decimal, and we're going to divide just like we would if it was a whole number. So I'm going to divide both sides by negative 0.03. Now, since we're dividing by a negative number, our inequality is going to flip. we're going to end up with m is less than or equal to 4. So I'm going to write that in here. Our frame of reference is the 4. It's included because it says m is less than or equal to, so we're going to have a bracket. And since it's less than, we're going to go towards the left. Our interval notation is going to be parentheses, negative infinity, comma, 4, bracket. Now let's look at number 15. We have 6b plus 3 is less than 3b plus 12. I'm going to subtract 3 from both sides. I get 6b plus 0 is less than 3b plus 9. Rewrite that. 6b is less than 3b plus 9. Subtract 3b from both sides. I get 3b is less than 0 plus 9, which is, I'm going to bring that up over here so we can finish it. 3b is less than 9. Divide both sides by 3. And I get b is less than 3. Write that in my inequality box. And now we can graph it. So 3. B is less than that, not equal to, but less than. So I'm going to have a parentheses going towards the left, indicating that less than. Our interval notation is going to be parentheses, negative infinity, comma, 3, parentheses. Let's look at number 16. We have negative 4n plus 12 plus 9n is greater than or equal to n plus 9 plus n. First thing I want to point out is these n's right here. Don't forget they have an invisible 1 with them. Before we start moving anything around, we need to combine like terms. So negative 4n plus 9n, that's going to give us 5n, and then we still have the plus 12. Is greater than or equal to 1n plus 1n is 2n plus 9. I'm going to subtract 12 from both sides. I get 5n plus 0 is greater than or equal to 2n minus 3. Rewrite that. 5n is greater than or equal to 2n minus 3. Now I want to subtract 2n from both sides. That's 3n is greater than or equal to 0 minus 3. I'm going to come up over here, finish this out. 3n is greater than or equal to negative 3. Divide both sides by 3. I'm dividing by a positive 3, so I'm not going to flip it. Just because this is a negative 3 over here doesn't mean I'm going to flip it. It's only if you divide by a negative. So that gives me n is greater than or equal to negative 1. So write that in my box right here. And now I can graph it. So negative 1 is here. N is greater than or equal to, so I'm going to have a bracket. And it's greater than, so it's going to go to the right. My interval notation is a bracket, negative 1, comma, positive infinity, parentheses. Number 17. 5 times a minus 1 is greater than 3 times a minus 2. I need to distribute first to the items within the parentheses. So I get 5a minus 5 is greater than 3a minus 6. Add 5 to both sides. That gives me 5a plus 0 is greater than 3a minus 1. Rewrite it. Now I need to subtract 3a from both sides. I end up with 2a is greater than 0 minus 1. Bring that up here and finish it. So I have 2a is greater than negative 1. Divide both sides by 2. And I get a is greater than negative 1/2. So I'm going to write that in here. You might be saying, well, there's no 1/2 on our graph. That's okay. It doesn't have to be labeled. We know that 1/2 is midpoint between 0 and 1, but this is a negative 1/2, so it's going to be midpoint between 0 and -1. So that's right here, okay? So it said, our inequality says A is greater than, not equal to, but greater than. So I'm going to have a parentheses shape here going towards greater than. And my interval notation is going to be a parentheses -1/2, comma, positive infinity, parentheses. Number 18. 2 times d minus 5 plus 3d is less than 4 times d minus 6 plus 17. So I need to distribute before I start combining anything. I end up with 2d minus 10 plus 3d is less than 4d minus 24 plus 17. Combine like terms. 2d plus 3d is 5d. And then I still have the minus 10. Less than 4d can't be combined with anything. But the negative 24 plus 17 is going to be a -7. I want to add 10 to both sides. End up with 5d plus 0 is less than 4d plus 3, and rewrite that. Subtract 4d from both sides. That gives us d is less than 0 plus 3, which is d is less than 3. Right, so I'm going to change colors for this graphing just because it's so close to the line. I don't want it to get confused with the blue. So let's see here, 3. It says d is less than that, so we're going to have a parentheses, and then it's going to go in this direction. The interval notation is going to be parentheses negative infinity, comma, 3 parentheses. Now let's look at number 19. First thing I notice is that we have 2 fractions here that we need to deal with. I need to find a number that will cancel out both the 12 and the 6. A number that both of those numbers go into is actually 12. So I'm going to use 12 over 1 to factor those out. So I'm going to write 12 over 1 times that 5 over 12. And that's less than 12 over 1 times, make sure you can still see that, 5 over 6. The 12 times the 5 is 60 over 12. 12 times 5 is 60 over 6. 60 divided by 12 becomes 5, so that fraction is now gone. 60 divided by 6 is 10, and now that one is gone. I'm going to go ahead and distribute, so that's 25x minus 35 is less than 10x minus 50. All right, I'm going to draw just a little box here. And I'm going to bring my problem up over here. 25x minus 35 is less than 10x minus 50, just because we ran out of room. Let me make that line a different color so we can actually see what it's doing here. All right, I'm going to add 35 to both sides. I end up with 25x plus 0 is less than 10x minus 15. 25x is less than 10x minus 15. I'm going to subtract 10x from both sides. And I end up with let's see here. I end up with 15x is less than 0 minus 15. Bring that down here. Needed a lot more room for this problem, didn't we? So 15x is less than negative 15. Divide both sides by 15. And I end up with x is less than negative 1. All right, so we're going to start here. I'm going to change colors. So negative 1. And x is less than that, so it's a parentheses. And we're going this direction. The interval notation for that is going to be negative infinity, comma, negative 1, parentheses. All right, number 20. Hopefully we have enough room for that one since we didn't have enough room for the other one. All right, so we're going to distribute each of these and then work on combining like terms. So I have 6w minus 10 plus 4w plus 24 greater than or equal to 6w plus 4 minus 2w minus 14. 6w plus 4w is going to be 10w. Negative 10 plus 24 will be a positive 14. 6w minus 2w is 4w. And then 4 minus 14 is going to be a negative 10. Subtract 14 from both sides. I get 10w plus 0 is greater than or equal to 4w minus 24. All right, now I'm going to subtract 4w from both sides. I end up with 6w is greater than or equal to 0 minus 24. Bring that up here so we can finish it out. Divide both sides by 6. And I end up with w is greater than or equal to negative 4. So my inequality is w is greater than or equal to negative 4. Start at that negative 4. I'm going to have a bracket since it's greater than or equal to. It includes that negative 4, and it says it's greater than. So I'm going to go to the right. So I have a bracket, negative 4, comma, positive infinity for number 20. Now let's look at our last 3 practice problems. Number 21, it has 2 times x plus 1 in between 2 endpoints, the negative 4 and the 6. So the first thing we need to do is distribute the 2 to both items in there. So I'm going to rewrite the negative 4 is less than. That 2 is going to become a 2x plus 2, which is less than or equal to 6. Now this is the part where we have to, when we subtract the 2 from here, we have to subtract the 2 from both endpoints as well. So I'm also going to write minus 2 here, minus 2 here. Because we're basically solving 2 problems in one. That's what we're doing here. So negative 4 minus 2 is negative 6, which is less than 2x plus 0, which is less than or equal to 6 minus 2 is 4. I'm going to rewrite that. Now I need to divide by 2, and I'm going to divide both end pieces by 2 as well. I end up with negative 3 is less than x, which is less than or equal to 2. We now have our inequality. Let's graph that. Let's find negative 3, and then let's find 2. The inequality next to the negative 3 says less than. It doesn't say or equal to, so I know I'm going to have a parentheses. The 2 does have the or equal to, so it's going to be a bracket. And then our x is in the middle. So our solutions are in between those 2 points. The interval notation is going to be a parentheses, negative 3, since it's not included. And then 2 with a bracket, since 2 is included. Number 22. 1 is less than or equal to 2/3 k plus 3, which is less than or equal to 7. The first thing I want to do is subtract 3 from both sides, or all three areas actually. 1 minus 3 is negative 2, which is less than or equal to 2/3 k plus 0, less than or equal to 4. Rewrite that. Negative 2 is less than or equal to 2/3 k, which is less than or equal to 4. I'm going to rewrite that a little bit just because I want to leave us, well, no, let me put that back the way we had that, because I want you to be able to see the difference in what we're about to do in this step. All right, so I'm going to rewrite the negative 2 less than or equal to. To get rid of that 2/3, we have to multiply by the reciprocal. So I'm going to write 3/2 times the 2/3 k. But if we do that there, we also have to do the 2 endpoints as well. So I'm going to add that to here, the 3/2 being multiplied, and then add that as here as well. 3 times negative 2 is a negative 6, and then we have that over the 2, which is less than or equal to 6. 3 times 2 is 6, and 2 times 3 is 6. 6/6 k, which is less than or equal to 4 times 3 is 12 over 2. That negative 6 over 2 becomes a negative 3, less than or equal to. The 6/6 becomes a 1, so it's just k. And then we have less than or equal to. 12 over 2 becomes 6. So we now have our inequality. Negative 3 is less than or equal to k, which is less than or equal to 6. So our 2 endpoints here that we're using are right here. Both of them are included in the solution set because it says or equal to. So they both have brackets. And then the solution set is in between. Our interval notation is going to have bracket, negative 3, comma, 6, bracket. Number 23. We have a word problem here, but we're going to do the same thing. For what values of x would the given rectangle have a perimeter of at least 154? So remember that at least means whatever is on the left-hand side needs to be greater than or equal to 154, because it has to be at least 154 or more. That's what they're saying. So they're talking about the perimeter. And remember, to find perimeter, it's 2 times length plus 2 times width equals the perimeter. So we're going to multiply 2 times the length, 2x plus 4, plus 2 times the width, which is x plus 28. This is our problem. I'm going to cover over here just to allow us enough room. But we've got to distribute here. So we end up with 4x plus 8 plus 2x plus 56, which is greater than or equal to 154. I'm just going to kind of box this off. Now we're going to combine like terms. We have 4x plus 2x. That's 6x. And then we have 8 plus 56. So that's plus 64, which is greater than or equal to 154. Now I'm going to subtract the 64 from both sides. That gives me 6x plus 0 is greater than or equal to, let's see, is that 90? Yeah, 90. So 6x is greater than or equal to 90. I'm going to rewrite that. Divide it by 6 on both sides. And I get x is greater than or equal to 15. So our x has to be greater than or equal to 15 for it to be a solution. So the way we would write our interval notation for that is bracket 15, comma, positive infinity, because it's going to go greater than that 15. It includes 15, but it's also going to be higher than 15. All right, let's look at our Bible verse. Very truly, I tell you, no servant is greater than his master, nor is a messenger greater than the one who sent him. John 13:16. All right, guys, I hope you